Imagine this. You've been reading about Carl Jung, trying to take steps toward personal growth. You hear about shadow work, facing your repressed fears, your anger, your flaws. Then you discover the Anima and Animus, the inner feminine or masculine, and suddenly you're wondering, which one do I start with? Do I deal with my shadow first, or dive into Anima and Animus integration? If you've ever asked yourself this, you're not alone. Jungians on Reddit, YouTube, and forums debate this question constantly. Some say the shadow must come first, others insist Anima work is the real key, and many feel stuck in the middle. Today, we'll explore what Jung actually said about the sequence, how it applies to your self-development, and, most importantly, how you can approach this integration in a grounded, practical way. Before we begin, let me ask you, have you felt stuck trying to decide which aspect of yourself to work on first? Share your experience in the comments. You may find others are wrestling with the same question. The shadow is the side of ourselves we'd rather not see. It's the envy we deny, the selfishness we excuse, the fear we bury, the shame we hope no one discovers. Jung described it as that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality. To make this clearer, think of the shadow as a basement in your home. It's where you've shoved all the boxes you didn't want to deal with. Old memories, embarrassing moments, painful emotions, all crammed into dark corners. But here's the thing. You don't get to move out of the house. You're still living above that basement. What's hidden below doesn't stay contained. It seeps up through the floorboards, shaping the whole atmosphere of your life whether you admit it or not. This is why many Jungians argue that shadow work must come first. If you skip it, you risk being blinded by your own unconscious material when working with deeper archetypes like the Anima or Animus. Jung himself often emphasized that the shadow is the easiest to encounter because it shows up so directly in daily life. Unlike more mysterious archetypes, the shadow is personal and concrete. You can feel it in your irritation with your spouse, in the competitive jab you feel at work, or in the guilty pleasure you don't admit out loud. For example, imagine you feel a surge of anger when your boss speaks with arrogance. Of course, part of that anger may be justified, but Jung would encourage you to also ask, is this pointing to my own repressed desire for authority? Or let's say your partner's neediness makes you roll your eyes. Beneath that reaction might be your disowned vulnerability, the part of you that longs to be cared for but feels too risky to admit. These everyday annoyances are not just random frustrations, they're invitations. The shadow speaks through the people and situations that trigger you most. Now, here's the paradox. The shadow is made up of the qualities you deny, but it also contains much of your unrealized potential. Maybe your anger holds the seed of assertiveness you've never claimed. Maybe your jealousy hides a creative impulse you've been too timid to express. Jung often pointed out that the shadow is not purely negative, it's simply what is hidden. And hidden within it is both poison and medicine. Doing shadow work doesn't mean you become flawless. It means you stop being ruled by what you refuse to acknowledge. You start to see your blind spots. You reclaim energy that was tied up in repression. You take ownership of your life instead of projecting it outward. Jung believed that unless we confront the shadow, we remain half-blind, living under illusions about who we are. So ask yourself this. What small irritations or judgments reveal something about your own shadow? It could be as simple as noticing the colleague whose laziness drives you crazy, and then asking, where am I lazy with my own dreams? These reflections are the first steps down into that basement, switching on the light, and discovering that what you feared might actually be the missing piece of your wholeness. Comment below with one irritation or judgment you've noticed recently that might point to your shadow. Sharing it might not only help you see more clearly, but also help others recognize themselves. If the shadow is like the basement of the psyche, then the Anima and Animus are like secret stairways leading deeper into the house. Passages that connect you not just to hidden personal material, but to the collective unconscious itself. Jung defined the Anima as the inner feminine figure in a man's psyche, and the Animus as the inner masculine figure in a woman's. These are not simply male or female traits in a social sense. They are archetypes, Timeless patterns that shape how we relate to the opposite sex, to creativity, to spirituality, and ultimately, to the self. The anima often appears in dreams or fantasies as a woman of great allure. A muse, a seductress, a mysterious stranger, or sometimes a wise guide. She embodies feeling, connection, and imagination. In contrast, the animus may show up as a chorus of men, a stern fatherly figure, a spiritual teacher, or at its worst, a rigid and judgmental inner critic. He embodies logos, structure, reason, and direction. Now, here's where things get both fascinating and dangerous. Jung noted that if these archetypes are not integrated, they don't just sit quietly in the background, they can possess the personality. That means the anima may flood a man with irrational moods, sudden obsessions, or an overpowering attraction to certain women who seem to hold the key to his soul. Similarly, the animus may take over a woman's psyche with rigid opinions, endless inner arguments, or an icy detachment from her own feelings. This is why many Jungians warn against jumping straight into anima or animus work without first confronting the shadow. If your own disowned impulses are still unacknowledged, the anima or animus can easily exploit them. They'll catch you off balance. They'll seduce you with fantasies or batter you with criticism. You'll project them onto people in your life, falling hopelessly in love, becoming addicted to a relationship, or finding yourself trapped in inner battles that aren't really about the outer world at all. Think of it like this: the shadow is the doorway into personal honesty. Without that honesty, meeting the anima or animus can feel like trying to climb a mountain in a storm. But once you've done some shadow work, these figures transform. They shift from tyrants into teachers. For men, the anima can evolve into an inner muse, inspiring creativity, compassion, and spiritual depth. For women, the animus can transform into a wise inner partner, encouraging independence, courage, and intellectual clarity. Jung even suggested that integration of the anima or animus opens the psyche to its deepest treasures, becoming a bridge to the self, that archetype of wholeness at the core of who we are. So here's the paradox. The anima and animus are among the most dangerous archetypes if neglected, but also among the most rewarding if integrated. They are both a risk and a gift. Have you ever felt drawn to someone with such intensity it almost felt mystical, as if they embodied something beyond themselves? That may not have been just attraction. That could have been your anima or animus calling for recognition. Reflection prompt: pay attention to your dreams and fantasies. Who shows up again and again? Is it a mysterious figure, a critic, a lover, a teacher? Comment below if you've noticed recurring figures in your inner world. Many viewers will resonate with your story, and it might even give you new insight into your own journey. So far, we've explored the shadow as the hidden basement of the psyche and the anima, animus as inner figures that can either mislead us or guide us. But how do these pieces fit together in the larger picture of Jung's psychology? Jung described the process of individuation as a lifelong journey, the unfolding of the whole personality. He often said it was the central task of the second half of life, when questions of meaning, purpose, and authenticity become more pressing than ambition or achievement. Many people encounter it most vividly in their 40s and 50s, exactly the stage of life where you might feel restless, unfinished, or in search of deeper answers. To map this journey, Jung outlined a rough sequence of encounters with the unconscious. 1. Persona. The social mask we wear. This is the role we present to the world. The professional, the parent, the friend, the respectable citizen. It's necessary, but if we mistake the mask for our true self, we live shallowly. Individuation often begins with realizing, I am not just my role. 2. Shadow. The personal unconscious. Here we meet the repressed qualities we deny in ourselves. Jung wrote that, the shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared. Facing it brings humility, honesty, and energy for growth. 3. Anima, animus. The contrasexual archetype. Once the shadow has been faced, the anima or animus often emerges more clearly. They are messengers from the collective unconscious, bridges to the self. But if encountered too soon, they overwhelm rather than guide. 4. Self. the center and totality of the psyche. Jung described it as both the goal and the origin of individuation. It's glimpsed through symbols of wholeness, mandalas, divine figures, or dreams of unification. The self represents the deepest truth of who we are, not the ego, but the whole of our being. At first glance, this sequence might look like a strict ladder: persona, then shadow, then anima and animus, then self. And many readers of Jung, as well as countless Reddit threads and YouTube comments, have treated it that way. But Jung himself cautioned that the psyche doesn't move mechanically from one step to the next. Life is rarely that neat. Instead, he saw individuation as more of a spiral. You revisit the same layers at deeper levels. You might begin with shadow work, then meet the anima, only to find the shadow rising again in a new form. Or you might glimpse the self in a dream long before you've done sustained shadow work. The order is real, but it's not rigid. It's more like a natural rhythm than a syllabus. Think of it like walking a mountain trail. There are stages, the foothills, the steep climb, the lookout points. But sometimes the path loops back, sometimes you stumble, sometimes you catch a glimpse of the summit earlier than expected. The point is not to complete the stages like a checklist, but to move toward wholeness with patience and honesty. Where do you sense yourself on this path? Still working with the masks of persona? Wrestling with shadow? Or maybe encountering the anima or animus in dreams or relationships? Share in the comments. Many others are likely walking the same stretch of the trail. Theory can feel abstract until we see how it plays out in the struggles of ordinary life. So let's walk through a practical example. A case that mirrors what many of us face in midlife, when questions of identity, relationships, and meaning rise to the surface. Imagine Sarah, a 45-year-old professional and mother. From the outside, her life looks stable: a good job, a long-term marriage, 2 kids nearly grown. But inwardly, she feels restless and unsatisfied. She finds herself criticizing her husband constantly. She complains about his controlling nature, the way he insists on making the final decision about finances, or how he always thinks he knows best. At first, Sarah frames this as a relationship problem. If only he would change, things would improve. But after repeated arguments, she begins to sense a deeper pattern. Why does his behavior bother her so intensely? Why such disproportionate anger? This is where shadow work begins. In therapy or through journaling, Sarah starts exploring her own disowned qualities. She realizes that she has a strong need for control too, a desire to assert herself, to make decisions, to take the lead. But throughout her life, she was taught that good women are agreeable, accommodating, and avoid conflict. So she repressed her assertiveness, pushing it into the shadow. Now it shows up outside herself, projected onto her husband. His controlling tendencies mirror her own denied drive for authority. By facing this, Sarah takes the first step of integration. She begins experimenting with speaking up, setting boundaries, and owning her assertiveness. Instead of criticizing her husband for being domineering, she admits, "I have that energy too." This doesn't fix everything overnight, but it changes the dynamic. She no longer feels like a helpless victim. She reclaims a piece of her shadow. Here's where the journey deepens. As Sarah works with her shadow, she begins to dream of a recurring male figure, a stern, sometimes hostile man who lectures her in her sleep. At first, she wakes up unsettled. But over time, she realizes this is her animus appearing. He embodies her inner masculine, her drive for independence, courage, and clarity. Initially, he comes in a negative form, as a critic, echoing her self-doubt. But as she dialogues with him, perhaps through journaling or active imagination, he begins to transform. The harsh lecturer softens into a wise mentor, pushing her towards self-reliance and confidence. This is a practical example of the natural sequence Jung described: shadow work creating the foundation for anima or animus work. Had Sarah tried to engage her animus first, she might have been overwhelmed by his hostility, mistaking him for her husband's flaws. But because she had already faced the shadow of her own control issues, she had the strength to meet her animus as a guide rather than an enemy. Have you noticed recurring dream figures or inner voices that seem to both challenge and guide you? Comment below. These stories often reveal universal themes, and sharing them helps others recognize their own anima or animus at work. At this point, you may be wondering, does the order really matter? Can't I just work on whichever part feels most pressing, shadow or anima, animus, and trust it will all balance out? It's a fair question, and many people online debate exactly this. But Jung was clear. There are real risks in skipping steps or tackling archetypes out of sequence. Let's start with shadow work. If you ignore the shadow and jump straight into anima or animus exploration, you're entering dangerous territory unprepared. Why? Because the anima and animus are more deeply rooted in the collective unconscious. They are powerful, numinous archetypes, and if the ego hasn't been strengthened by confronting the shadow, it can easily be swept away. For men, this often shows up as being possessed by the anima. He might idealize women, placing unrealistic expectations on partners, or fall into intoxicating moods and fantasies. We see this in midlife affairs that seem almost dreamlike, not so much about the real partner, but about an anima projection. Instead of relating to the actual person, he's relating to an unconscious image. Without shadow work to ground him, he can lose himself in illusions. For women, the danger is the negative animus. He often shows up as an inner critic or a voice of rigid, dogmatic opinions. A woman who hasn't confronted her shadow may find herself dominated by this harsh internal figure, feeling constantly judged or second-guessing her worth. Relationships can suffer too, because she projects this animus outward, assuming men are always controlling, critical, or oppressive, whether or not that's truly the case. In both cases, the anima and animus, instead of serving as bridges to greater wholeness, become tyrants. They flood the psyche, distort perception, and create confusion in relationships. This is exactly why Jung insisted on shadow work first. Facing the shadow humbles the ego. It strengthens self-awareness. It prepares the ground for meeting the anima or animus without being swallowed by them. But let's not forget, there are also risks on the other side. Some people get stuck in shadow work. They spend years analyzing their flaws, digging endlessly into trauma, guilt, and darkness. They become so focused on what's wrong that they never move toward what's possible. Jung warned that shadow work is not an end in itself. It's a necessary foundation, but the goal is to integrate that energy into creativity, vitality, and growth. Otherwise, you're just circling the basement forever. The key lesson here is balance. Yes, shadow comes first, but you don't have to wait until every last shadow is integrated. That would be impossible. Think of it more like building a foundation for a house. You need the base solid before adding the second floor, but you don't need the foundation to be flawless. Once you've faced enough of your projections, admitted some uncomfortable truths, and reclaimed pieces of yourself, you're strong enough to begin engaging the anima or animus. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by a dream figure, an inner critic, or a relationship that felt too much to be real? That might have been the risk of meeting an archetype too soon. Share your experience in the comments. Many people will recognize the same pattern in themselves. We've explored the theory, the sequence, and the risks, but now comes the most important part. What can you actually do with this knowledge? Jung's psychology wasn't meant to stay locked in textbooks. It's a living, breathing process of self-discovery. So let's walk through some practical steps you can take on your individuation journey, beginning with the shadow and gradually moving toward the anima or animus. Step 1. Notice your projections. The shadow makes itself known through projections, the traits we refuse to see in ourselves, so we dump them onto others. Start by paying attention to what irritates or fascinates you in people. Ask yourself, what does this say about me? If arrogance enrages you, could it be a disowned desire to stand tall? If laziness frustrates you, could it reveal your own exhaustion and need for rest? Keep a journal of these triggers. Over time, you'll see patterns that reveal what's lurking in your shadow. Step 2. Practice containment. Once you notice projections, don't rush to act them out. Instead, contain the energy. For example, if you feel envy toward a colleague, resist gossip or resentment. Instead, journal honestly. What quality in them do I wish I had? Where in my life am I holding back? By owning the energy, you transform it from poison into fuel. Step 3. Dialogue with the shadow. Shadow work isn't just about observing, it's about engaging. Try active imagination, a technique Jung pioneered. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and imagine talking with your shadow as if it were a person. Ask, "What do you want from me? What are you trying to show me?" Write down the dialogue. You might be surprised at how much wisdom comes from the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Step 4. Open to the Anima, Animus. Once you've built some honesty with the shadow, start paying attention to recurring inner figures in your dreams and fantasies. The Anima may appear as a muse, a mysterious woman, or even a lover who feels larger than life. The Animus might show up as a stern father, a wise guide, or a critic. Don't take these figures literally, see them as symbolic. Begin journaling or sketching them. Ask yourself, what qualities do they carry that I need to integrate? Step 5. Dialogue, don't obey. When the Anima or Animus appears, resist the temptation to surrender completely. They are not meant to dominate you but to guide you. Again, active imagination can help. If your Animus appears as a critic, challenge him. Why are you attacking me? What truth lies beneath this criticism? If your Anima seduces you into fantasy, ask, what inspiration or creativity are you trying to awaken in me? Over time, these figures evolve, critics soften, seducers inspire, tyrants transform into mentors. Step 6. Look for transformation. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow or silence the Anima, Animus. It's to transform your relationship with them. You'll know progress is being made when you react less harshly to others' flaws. Your inner critic begins to offer constructive guidance. Dreams shift from chaotic to symbolic, offering insights instead of fears. Which of these steps feels most alive for you right now? Noticing projections, dialoguing with the shadow, or meeting inner figures? Comment below. Your reflection could be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. Remember, individuation is not about rushing. It's about moving one step at a time, with honesty and patience. Each step you take, even the smallest, strengthens your foundation and opens you to deeper levels of your own wholeness. By now, you might see how shadow work and Anima, Animus integration are not just isolated exercises, but essential steps on the larger journey Jung called individuation. But what does this bigger picture actually mean? And why does it matter so much, especially in midlife? Jung believed that individuation is the process of becoming whole, of aligning the conscious ego with the deeper self. The self, in Jung's psychology, is the center and totality of the psyche, the inner blueprint of what you are meant to become. It's not about ego inflation or perfection, it's about wholeness. In the first half of life, most of us focus on building our persona, the roles we play, the careers we develop, the identities we wear proudly in society. And that's necessary, but Jung observed that in midlife, the mask begins to crack. The questions grow louder. Is this all there is? Who am I beyond my job, my family role, my reputation? What unlived parts of me still call out from the depths? This is where the shadow, the Anima, and the Animus enter the picture. They are not obstacles, but doorways. The shadow confronts you with the parts of yourself you've denied. The Anima or Animus invites you into a deeper relationship with the unconscious. Together, they prepare you to encounter the self, the archetype of wholeness, often glimpsed in dreams through symbols of unification. A mandala, a divine figure, or even a sense of inner peace you can't quite explain. Now, here's something crucial. Individuation is not linear. It doesn't follow a tidy checklist. You don't simply graduate from shadow work to Anima work and then to the self, never to return. Jung described the psyche as more like a spiral staircase. You keep circling back, meeting the shadow again in new forms, encountering the Anima or Animus at deeper levels, and catching glimpses of the self in moments of synchronicity or profound meaning. Each cycle takes you deeper, closer to wholeness. For example, you might think you've done your shadow work, only to discover, years later, a new layer of hidden anger or fear. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the psyche is alive, still unfolding. Similarly, your relationship with the anima or animus might change over time. What was once a seductive fantasy may later emerge as a wise guide. This cyclical, spiral nature is especially important in midlife. It explains why so many people in their 40s and 50s experience restlessness, depression, or a sense of midlife crisis. These are not simply problems to fix, they are invitations. They signal that the self is calling you forward, urging you to integrate what's been left behind and to live more authentically. And this is where Jung's message becomes hopeful. Individuation is not about becoming flawless. It's about embracing all that you are, the light and the dark, the masculine and feminine, the conscious and unconscious. The shadow and anima, animus are not enemies, but allies. Each integration brings more energy, creativity, and depth into your life. Which unlived part of you feels like it's calling most loudly right now? The repressed shadow? The anima or animus in your dreams? Or perhaps a deeper longing for the self? Share your reflection below. You may inspire someone else walking the same path. So, should you integrate the shadow or the anima, animus first? Jung's answer, and the experience of countless people who've walked this path, is clear. Begin with the shadow. The shadow is the narrow doorway, the basement you must first descend into. It humbles you, grounds you, and teaches you honesty. Without it, the anima and animus can overwhelm you, seducing you into illusions or turning into inner tyrants. But with shadow work, you develop the strength to meet them as guides, as partners in your growth. Remember, though, individuation is not a checklist. It's a spiral. You'll circle back to the shadow again and again, discovering new layers. The anima and animus will appear in different guises throughout your life, sometimes as critics, sometimes as muses, sometimes as mentors. And along the way, if you're attentive, you'll catch glimpses of the self, the wholeness that has been quietly shaping your journey all along. This isn't easy work, but it is meaningful work. It's the adventure of a lifetime. And especially in midlife, when old roles and identities start to feel thin, this process offers something solid, the chance to become more fully yourself. So I'll leave you with this question. Which aspect of your psyche do you feel most called to work with right now, the shadow, or the anima, animus? Share your thoughts in the comments below. You may discover that your struggles echo those of many others on the same path. If this video gave you clarity or encouragement, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this message. Together, we can make the journey toward wholeness less lonely and far more illuminating.